Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Today, the fallout from Canada's India accusations continues. The Five Eyes nations, despite trying to avoid getting too involved in the increasing crisis, do find themselves having to now publicly align with Canada. We report on the varying reactions from each nation, and Canada itself reveals more information about India's methods, and we ourselves delve a little deeper into who is involved on the Indian government side, as well as a profile of one of the key criminal linchpins in the whole sorry saga, Lawrence Bishnoi. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our amazing viewers. Thanks for the amazing comments. Keep them coming.
Indeed, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And as always, we will be covering lots of you great comments that have been filling up below the video, so thank you as always for those. Let's get the show underway. James, what are you going to start us off with today?
It appears that the Washington Post has actually come out with a name of one of the ministers apparently involved in the transnational repression and the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Now, this has come out from the Washington Post, and then it was further emphasized and reported on by The Wire. So I wanted to bring that one up and just kind of go over that and discuss it, because I thought that there were some very interesting facts there that may not be known by the general public. And it is definitely very interesting, Angus. And let's jump right into it. So Amit Shah has been identified as the one of the high-level government officials in India that's been involved in this whole conspiracy and this whole caper. He is actually the Minister of the Home Office in India. Now, what really makes it interesting here is that he does have connections to Modi and to Bishnoi, but there's a lot more to this individual because he actually was himself in a lot of legal trouble for alleged murders and such that he was accused of. He was supposed to go to trial just before Modi took office. Once Modi took office, all of those charges just disappeared, and then he took office. So it's very interesting to see that connection and how Modi has presumably gotten him out of these murder charges and accusations. So it's very interesting on that end. And he is also, with being the Union Home Minister, he is also responsible for the research and analysis wing in India, who have authorized intelligence gathering missions and attacks on Sikh separatists, not only in Canada, but elsewhere in the world as well, and especially in India. Now, let's take a look here. Now, we have definitely got some interesting information on his not only connections to Modi, but also on Bishnoi. Now, the RCMP, of course, have come right out and alleged that Bishnoi was one of the accused in, that he was in jail in India, but is the accused gang leader controlling the gangs from prison. Now, he doesn't just control gangs in India. They actually have an international reach, just like we see a lot of the global crime syndicates and crime gangs that are doing these days. And this really is concerning because originally they said that they were talking of a senior official in India. And now it turns out that the Washington Post has alleged that it is Shah that they are referring to with the RCMP investigation. We don't know the accuracy or the source of the Washington Post's naming and where they got that information, but we do recognize that the Washington Post is a very trusted publication. They are a very trusted source of news, so we have no reason to doubt their sources. But again, we don't have the confirmation here in our office. So with that, of course, we know that this is the ongoing saga that has led to the expulsion of 6 diplomats from Canada, as well as diplomats being removed from the US. Now, what I wanted to really touch on was here on this part of the article. It brings up what I brought up already about the violence. And that was a decade ago. And I'm going to read this right from the article. This is not the first time Shah has been accused of involvement in extrajudicial violence. A decade ago, the Central Bureau of Investigation had charged him as Home Minister of Gujarat with being part of the conspiracy to kill another individual and his wife and associate in police encounters. So fake police encounters are something common in India that we see when they are targeting the Sikh community and other minorities. And then they claim that there was some kind of a scuffle or resisting of the officers when the individuals end up being killed. And generally it's that they get shot or just beaten to death. Now, this again, all of the charges were discharged by the trial court as soon as Narendra Modi became prime minister, and the CBI chose not to appeal. So it's, again, just a bombshell on that regard. Now, taking it even a step further, we're going to skip down a bit here. And, as we know, Justin Trudeau has presented credible evidence to the India government. They are failing to actually act on it or to recognize the evidence. And Justin Trudeau said that he believes that India made a monumental mistake by choosing their diplomats and organized crime to attack Canadians, to make them feel safe here in their homes, and even more to create acts of violence and even murder, and it's unacceptable. So we're going to take a look. He went on to bring up that they've worked with the Five Eyes partners, particularly the United States, in gathering information. The U.S., of course, has a similar issue, although the death was, or the death attempt or assassination attempt was unsuccessful on with regards to Nikhil Gupta being charged in that and extradited. And now he sits in the Metropolitan Federal Detention Center in New York City. Now, I want to go through one more part of this, and that is to do with Bishnoi. Now, he is, of course, the leader of the Bishnoi gang, and it says here that the RCMP accused Indian government of outsourcing the targeting of Sikhs in Canada to the Lawrence Bishnoi gang. Bishnoi, who's currently being held in jail in Gujarat, but is reportedly running his operations from there without let or hindrance. Even though Bishnoi is wanted for murder in states like Punjab and Maharashtra, the Union Ministry of Affairs, Shah's ministry once again, has issued an order that he cannot be shifted from that jail to anywhere else for questioning or for proceeding with charges. The MHA invoked a little known and little used rule under the Criminal Procedure Code last year to ensure that Bishnoi would remain in custody in Gujarat, and has recently renewed this order for 1 more year. Now, it's very interesting because why are they protecting Bishnoi? Why are they keeping him in Modi's home state? And of course, we know that that Shah also is from that region and represented that region at one point as well. So we really have to look at this and wonder why Bishnoi is being held in that prison, why they're using a very, very rarely used subset of the Criminal Procedure Code to keep him there, to keep him accessible, and to keep him under their thumb. So again, it's just really breaking news. And then the article goes on to just give a bit more of a background timeline for October the 10th and 12th, which you can read on your screen if you so wish. But Angus, it just keeps getting deeper and deeper. And yeah, as they say, we got to watch the seeds we sow because now they're coming home.
Yeah, it's very clear that the deeper you dig into this whole story, that it really is uncovering the really classical can of worms. There is, I would say, certainly looking at it from a Western perspective, a bit of a Gujarat mafia going on here. And if you dig deeper into Amit Shah and Narendra Modi's background, and of course Lawrence Bishnoi's background, all natives of Gujarat. And if you look at the history of Narendra Modi, who was once dubbed the butcher of Gujarat after a massacre of Muslims back in, I think it was 2002, which actually got him barred from the West. He was not allowed to enter the West, certainly the United States, because of that accusation. Narendra Modi, his career started, essentially his political career started with the RSS as a young student with the RSS in Gujarat. But funnily enough, so did that of Amit Shah. Amit Shah also was a student of the RSS in Gujarat. And both of their careers, their political careers and their careers within the RSS itself, polarised and revolved and orbited around each other as they rose up through the ranks of the RSS. And it's what has become clear is that as Narendra Modi's career became stellar, he took Amit Shah with him, and Amit Shah has been essentially a right-hand man to Narendra Modi throughout their political careers. And Narendra Modi has very much protected Amit Shah and kept him under his wing. But likewise, Amit Shah has done his level best to ensure that Narendra Modi remains protected from others outside. And the two of them have quite a history, even within the BJP itself and the RSS itself, in that they have been pretty ruthless in ensuring they have sidelined or removed any political rivals in their respective career paths. So the pair of them together are really quite a pair. It is no surprise then that within Gujarat itself, Lawrence Bishnoi, who chose a slightly different path, I use the word slightly deliberately there because he became a criminal, and one wonders what the links are between criminality and Indian politics. Clearly that line is not so black and white. Lawrence Bishnoi did choose this different path in Gujarat. He became, shall we say, a master criminal even from a very young age. But clearly there are links, there are ties between the criminal fraternity and the RSS, and particularly Amit Shah and Narendra Modi. So it is very apparent. Modi himself was Chief Minister of Gujarat for 12 years, at the same time as Amit Shah was essentially again his right-hand man. And it was no surprise then that Amit Shah was elected president of the BJP. And again, those ties run deep between the two of them. It is no surprise then that they would retain their possible connections with the criminal fraternity that they probably developed during their time in Gujarat. And as this whole saga has exploded and unfolded, this as I keep calling it, this obsessive agenda against the Khalistan movement, which again remains a huge threat to the whole control, the whole dominance of the RSS and the Brahmins. They have seen the Khalistan movement, or certainly the Sikh community, as a big threat to them. So, of course, they have turned their guns on the Sikh community, and therefore it is no surprise that they would dig deep into their criminal connections to then use these to then target Khalistanis, both, of course, within the Punjab itself, as has been reported regularly, various deaths linked to criminal gangs of Khalistanis, and likewise now in the diaspora. And Bishnoi is known to have connections internationally, particularly in Canada, and it's again no surprise that those connections have been used to remove Khalistanis throughout the world, as I can say Canada, but of course here in the UK and in the US. So, really, the finger of suspicion points at Amit Shah. There is no proof as yet, certainly out in the public domain. I do strongly suspect that Canadian intelligence agencies, and therefore most likely the Five Eyes intelligence agencies, will have evidence, if not proof, that this plot, let's call it, does run certainly past Vikram Yadav, CC1 as named. It probably does go up to Amit Shah. And certainly, head of RAW at the time, Ajit Doval, again another right-hand man of Narendra Modi. So it's, I think, very apparent that this whole plot does have its roots, its sources in the political executive level, in other words, the BJP and, of course, the RSS. It's very, very, very unlikely that this whole massive plot, this complex plot, was hatched at a low operational level within RAW. There is no way that an operation like this that involves murdering very high-profile political opponents of the RSS and the BJP, that was hatched at a low level within RAW. No chance. It could only have been sanctioned and signed off at a much, much higher level, and by that, obviously, it points to the head of RAW and therefore Ajit Doval. And there is absolutely no way that he would sign something off like that without the knowledge of Amit Shah and, of course, Narendra Modi. So the big question, James, is will the evidence, which I have no doubt exists, will this evidence ever enter the public domain? We will wait and see. I think it's very clear that Canada knows about it, CSIS knows about it, and therefore US and the Five Eyes, etc., know about it. The big question is, will the public find out about it?
Exactly, Angus. So only time will tell, but the plot just keeps getting thicker, as they say. And with that, of course, we know that Modi and his teams are just in overdrive when it comes to the control of the media. And we're going to talk about something that is called the rapid response mechanism, and that we'll get into in just a moment. But we're referring that to the media releases and the way that the narrative gets pushed by Modi. Now, last night, Angus, you covered the story about the threats to various planes and the India government trying to push the narrative and blame the Sikh community for that. And just on that note, the people that were flown into, they had to make an emergency landing in Iqaluit, which is the far north tip of Canada. It is a very remote area. But just so the Indian people know that Canada, although there's a diplomatic rift right now and political landscape is looking very difficult, Canada still stands by anybody, including the Indian diaspora, whether you are a Sikh, whether you're Hindu, whether you are of any other ethnic background. The military here in Canada immediately launched a plane and over to Iqaluit and actually transferred everybody onto a military plane and took them to, I believe it was Chicago Airport. So the Canadian government definitely moved real quick to take care of all of those people that were on that airline that got redirected to Iqaluit. So I just wanted to give that quick update, Angus, on your story from last night. But let's take a look at other narratives that the India government likes to push. Now, here's a couple of quick examples before we get into what exactly is the rapid response mechanism. And here is examples. Flying by the seat of Trudeau's pants. Top U.S. security expert blasts Canada's khalistan policy. Now, interestingly enough, this guy that the station and the India Times have been talking to is just going on about him going by the seat of his pants, that there's no real evidence, that it's just all fabricated so that Trudeau can pick up votes, and it's just ridiculous. Now this guy went on to just lambaste Trudeau, but he also didn't recognize any evidence. He talked as though there was no evidence whatsoever, that it hasn't been presented, and so forth. He also went on to talk about Lawrence Bishnoi. Once again, his name pops up, and he was saying that there's no way that Bishnoi could be controlling anything because he's in a prison in India. And I just laughed at that, because even in the US, they have prison gang leaders in prisons that are still calling the shots. These shot callers are not just calling the shots within the walls of the penitentiaries, but also on the streets. So for him, as an American so-called top intelligence official, or expert, it's just laughable where he comes across with this really uneducated and ill-conceived notions that that it can't be that India's doing this, it can't be that he has control, whatever the case is. And it should be also noted that this individual by the name of Mark Rubin is with the American Enterprise Institute and the Director of Policy Analysis with the Middle East Forum. And this is a nonprofit think tank, very right-wing. And down here, I just thought I'd bring up a note that comes up on Wikipedia that they claim some of the American Enterprise Institute positions have attracted controversy, including their defense policy recommendations for the Iraq War, their analysis of the financial crisis of 07-08, and their energy and environmental policies based on their more than 2-decade-long opposition to the prevailing science opinion on climate change. So again, they're climate change deniers. So it just shows where the mentality is of this so-called national security expert and international affairs expert. So the other headline that they're really pushing is that now apparently the Canadian Khalistan representatives and the Khalistan Liberation Force were responsible for the death and murder of a teacher and Shira Chakra awardee in 2020. So now India's blaming Canadians for killing Indians on Indian soil. It's just getting so silly. But at the end of the day, if that was the case, where is the evidence? We're talking 2020. No word of this has come up until all of a sudden now, just yesterday, they brought this out and released it, pushing this narrative through the media landscape, mostly through the India-controlled media, which of course spills over into a lot of the other so-called media outlets in North America, who also have many ties to India or influencers that are being paid by India. And so in any event, once again, they claim that it was the Canadian Khalistan movement that was involved in that murder. So it's just another tit for tat. And, you know, it's just ongoing and almost ridiculous in terms of that claim. But again, if there is evidence, by all means, no matter where they are in the world, they really should be held accountable. If there's an individual or individuals that were involved in the murder of an India citizen on India soil, by all means, they should be held to account for that. So let's go back here and let's just kind of take a quick peek at different findings and information. We're not going to go over this part of the release for the Sparks notes on the threats to the airlines, because Angus, you covered that last night. So let's just go on to the RRM findings and what is the rapid response mechanism. Now, let's first take a look here that a report that was discussed earlier has already laid bare the scale and sophistication of India's state-sponsored disinformation campaigns, particularly how they are designed to shape global narratives around Sikh activism. Now, a lot of this part that you had covered last night in relation to, as I said, the airline threats. So let's just skip down and then we'll cover this part here is that, as I was just saying, that they use not only media accounts, but also social media influencers to push the pro-India narrative. And they, you know, these people who are so-called influencers are there. They speak whatever is put in front of them for the money for the most part. It's all about business and paid media influence. So that's, you know, you've got to take that with a grain of salt. And it went on to say the government of India is opportunistic and will seek to leverage prominent non-Indo-Canadians to achieve India's foreign interference goals where it suits India's interest. Now, I'm going to go fly through this because we've got an hour show and I could spend hours on this. So I'm just going to go through it quickly. I've highlighted a few areas, but I won't even cover those in totality. So what is the Security Intelligence Threat Evaluation, also known as SITE? And that is the briefing provided by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and that evaluates the threats posed by foreign interference activities in Canada, focusing on countries like India. Not only India, though, so just keep that in mind. We're not only watching India. It outlines how foreign actors, particularly the government of India, engage in covert operations to influence Canadian politics, public opinion, and diaspora communities. The site briefing highlights the use of disinformation, media manipulation, and leveraging both Indo-Canadian and non-Indo-Canadian individuals to promote pro-Indian narratives while undermining Sikh activism, particularly around the Khalistan movement. This brief serves as a critical source of intelligence on the sophistication methods used by India to manipulate public discourse and exert influence within Canadian institutions. So again, that gives you a good idea as to what and why the Canadian government has that service or that department. So as we continue on, we are looking at all of these different departments and government agencies, law enforcement, and the such. Now, this particular department, the RRM, is handled by Global Affairs Canada, and they are, again, a separate unit that is at arm's length from influence by the actual politicians, whether it's Justin Trudeau, Jagmeet Singh, or Pierre Poilievre. So again, those are not those are not influenced by the political end. They are at an arm's length to make sure that there's integrity and information that stays abundant to Canadians, but also that they keep the close eye on what's going on here. Now let's take a quick peek at the other document that just kind of gives you a bit more, and we'll just hit the highlights and then move on from there, because again, we will run out of time here. So let's just move on quickly here. And I'm just going to get this up in front of you so that you can actually see what we're talking about. And it's very essential that other companies, countries, corporations, everybody has their own sort of division of this RM, and that is how they respond to a lot of disinformation about their companies and such online. But this one specifically, again, is targeting the Sikh community. So let's take a look at this quickly. And again, the sophistication of India's disinformation campaigns we've covered to the point of it being aligned with the message of Modi and his BJP government. And I'll just kind of scroll down a little slower so that if you want to pause your screen, you can take a look at the parts that I'm skipping through here. But again, they're repeatedly pushing specific themes, and that's Canada harboring terrorists and extremists, questioning the legitimacy of Sikh leaders like Najjar, focusing on alleged terrorist affiliations, which again, there's been absolutely no credible evidence presented by India to Canada at any time about that. They are encouraging Canadian authorities to take violent action against Khalistani activists. And that, again, is something we've seen in the media where the India government really pushes that narrative to try to go after and shut down the Khalistan movement. They want to discredit the political leadership of Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh by associating them with extremism. And I think that anybody who's watching this show, or anybody that's seen general media online, has seen this real big push by India to really discredit our Canadian politics and to play a significant role in the interference of our sovereign nation when it comes to political parties. Now, let's quickly get down here to the global reach. Now, we know, of course, that you covered some of this last night, Angus, about the different news agencies that are really pushing narratives on behalf of the Canadian government, but also that when they push their narrative so hard, it does spill over into the mainstream Western media. We are seeing budget cuts like never before in the realm of the news media world. And unfortunately, there are some agencies that are getting very lazy and lackadaisical about what they report on. And they pick up some of these stories and report on them as fact when they are not even close to such. The report further reveals how the Indian media collaborates with state agencies to propagate false or skewed narratives. And again, just constantly repeating a lot of the same arguments and points. So with the conclusion here, we're just going to wrap this part up, and then we'll cover a bit more of this on the next show so that you can kind of get the rest of it. But this report was in conjunction with the Punjab's longstanding analysis of Indian disinformation tactics and painting a clear picture how they've systematically targeted Sikh activism through multi-layered disinformation strategy. By controlling the narrative through the Modi-aligned media, leveraging state influence, and deploying cognitive warfare tactics, India seems to suppress any form of Sikh political mobilization, not just within India, but in the global context, which again, we already know from what we're seeing here in Canada and around the world. And with the RRM, there is also involvement with other G7 nations. And that, again, just shows the level of threat that social media and online narratives can have on a democracy and, anything else. You see people canceled, you see companies shut down. I mean, it's just insane. Now, following the Prime Minister's statement last September about the potential involvement of the India government, of course, we saw a major influx of the India government and media labeling Trudeau's government as harboring the extremists. that they were terrorists and that Canada is supporting them, which is not true. We support the freedom of speech, the right to gather, the right to opinions, and that's what the Khalistan movement is all about, is a peaceful and democratic way to voice opinions on the Punjab region and on Khalistan. So, of course, the India government wants to criminalize that, but again, we have rights and freedoms that we actually enforce and appreciate in Canada. They also went as far as to threaten Jagat Singh, which we've covered as well, where he has actually been the recipient of several duty to warn notices from law enforcement stating that there is a real and credible threat against his life and safety. So again, it's very important. We'll end it there, Angus, because there's just so much more that I can go on. So I'll save the other half of this document for the next show. But most importantly, it just shows that no matter what angles that we're looking at, Angus, the name Lawrence Bishnoi just keeps showing up everywhere.
Yes, he does indeed, and I'll come on to my profile of Lawrence in a moment. But it's I think this report is obviously a very detailed report about what is going on, and as we've reported regularly, there is this huge propaganda war going on, and at the moment, India have been on the front foot for several years. They are, as I've said, massively resourced in the past. I think they have a budget of at least $400 million annually to push out the RSS agenda through its various networked affiliates and its organisations and its various channels that it's nurtured over the years, whether it's through academia, through mainstream media, or just through simple online social media. And I think it's one of the key points you brought out here, James, I think in this report as well, are using other areas to try and broaden the consensus. It's not just the usual Indian suspects coming out with these news items or making these claims across the media. They're actually roping in Western news sources through whatever means. It's usually through a carrot approach. In other words, there's usually a financial incentive. And it's interesting that you brought up that American Institute, because again, that's actually a prime example of how these things work, whereby they are funded. They have. I think that very institute itself has an employment roster of over 200 people. It's funded to something like $50 million a year, and it's quite a well-known right-wing think tank in the US. And as you said, it's come out with all sorts of wild claims over the years, but primarily from a right-wing perspective. Now, if you dig a little deeper into organisations like this, they of course are funded. They are funded by private enterprise, private individuals, and of course those people have an agenda, and so the results of their reports that they produce are always biased towards whatever their funders require. And actually that very same institute, for example, this gives you a prime example of this, they were heavily funded by the tobacco industry some years ago, and of course, lo and behold, they came out with all sorts of pro-tobacco reports, pro-tobacco industry. So again, likewise, it's no surprise, and I think the clue here was in their usage, their language usage, referring to Khalistan militants, Khalistan extremists. Here we go again. It's that same old India-sourced narrative that anybody who supports Khalistan or politically promotes Khalistan is therefore, by their definition, an extremist or a militant, and by extension, a terrorist. So the very use of that language just actually proves without any shadow of a doubt that they are funded by an Indian source to come out with this nonsense narrative. So I think the clue is there. And again, I think, James, you hit the nail on the head there when you said the problem is the whole business model of the news industry has had to change massively since the internet came on stream. In the old days, the news outlets were either funded by the state or they were funded by advertising, essentially, which was at the time a very healthy way of promoting news items or news shows. Now, of course, the advertising's dried up. The internet has made news items essentially free for most people, but of course that means that there's no money left. The budgets have dropped massively for news shows, certainly for the mainstream news shows, and even small news shows have to struggle. It's usually funded by other sources, by private sources again, which means it's very easy now to influence the news agenda. Because of course anybody with money, and by that read this $400 billion no, I beg your pardon, it's $400 million a year budget sourced from the RSS in India. How very easy it is then to buy news sources to get the RSS agenda out there, because everybody out there as a news source is saying, please, I need money. And if that money comes conditioned and wrapped up with, well, you've got to report a certain narrative and it's anti-Khalistan, pro-India, of course, a lot of these news outlets, privately funded organisations, whatever it is, they're going to say, yes, please give me your money because that keeps me in business. And yeah, sure, I'll report whatever it is, whatever narrative that you want. So I think the RRM have been very good. And I think the final important point to bring out here is the fact that it's been identified, the RRM, amongst many other organisations working very hard out there to dig out the behind-the-scenes narrative and the behind-the-scenes agenda going on, the propaganda that's being generated. They are now identifying the sources of these. They are identifying the fact that it actually exists. Propaganda has, of course, always existed, but what they are doing now is they are highlighting just how much of a proportion of the news that is hitting the mainstream is being generated for a purely propagandist point of view and a propagandist agenda. And of course they are then telling the governments and of course the public about what's going on, and that in turn then influences the policy making. And that's what it's important, is that the governments now realise how much of the so-called news that's coming out is actually a fake narrative, and they are then they are being forced to change their policies and their own political agendas based on the fact that what they're now being fed is fake. So yeah, James, I think this is very important. It is a secret war. It's a hidden war that's going on behind the scenes, but it's very important because it is hugely influential.
Absolutely, Angus. And the biggest question I think that comes out of that story is, how the heck do we get a budget of $400 million a year?
Well, all I can guarantee, James, is it doesn't matter what they offer us. Unfortunately, we stand for the truth. Much
No,
as
I'm
I would
talking
love a
about
huge
for our
budget.
show, not from India. I'm just talking for our show.
Well, absolutely. I think, unfortunately, even our pockets are not quite that deep, much as I wish they were.
So, okay,
That does leave me on, though.
Angus, let's go on to your stories tonight.
Indeed, and that does actually lead on to my first story, which is looking at the mainstream media here in the West. I did say yesterday, of course, the mainstream media is now really picking up on this whole story, because it is a very big story, and by extension of that, they are then asking the right questions. What is this all about? What is Khalistan? Who are these Khalistan people that India is trying to kill? Which is great news, because it means the whole this whole pressure from the Sikh community, this lobbying from every level, from grassroots level, whether it's protesting out in the streets, whether it's turning up for the referendum in mass droves with the huge waves of Khalistani flags everywhere, or whether it's through simple political lobbying and getting the Sikh community's voice heard at a political level. It's working, because now it is in the mainstream news. Now, my first article, and of course one of the big things that we've highlighted over the last 48 hours, and again reflects what we've talked about in the past, is the deafening silence from the UK about this whole issue. And again, I've asked this question on a regular basis: why is the UK so shamefully silent on the whole Khalistan issue and the whole India transnational repression issue? So Sky News, and I showed you a fantastic interview of Maninder Singh yesterday, who was interviewed again on mainstream Sky News, one of our most watched news channels. He laid out the whole Khalistan issue, he laid out the case for Khalistan, and he very articulately pointed out what India is up to, and again, to a very large Western mainstream audience. Now, Sky News, once again, has picked up on this, and they've produced on their website a big news article to support that whole coverage of the whole issue. And they've said that the UK, and they've now reported that the UK is actually having now had its hand forced. It is having to react. And it says the UK has said India needs to cooperate with Canada's investigation into the murder of a Sikh leader in British Columbia after the two countries expelled each other's diplomats over the issue. And they continue to say that the tensions place, and they've brought out the complexities, and again, it does reflect what we have talked about, the UK's rather difficult situation in many cases due to its historic links with India, but of course its place in the G7 and NATO, etc. And Sky News, actually, one of the few outlets that do actually look into this, they say the tensions place the UK somewhat in the middle, with India and Canada both part of the Commonwealth, of course. That, again, the Commonwealth has these inextricable links between all these nations. the UK and Canada both in the G7 and NATO, and the UK and India sharing a defence partnership and a possible free trade deal. Of course, they bring up this major issue, which I think is one of the most overriding issues, is the free trade deal that the UK is so desperate to get with India. Now, Sky reports that a couple of days ago, Monday, our Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Trudeau spoke to each other over the phone, where they discussed what they quote as recent developments regarding allegations under investigation in Canada. That was sourced from Downing Street. The Foreign Office has now publicly said, we are in contact with our Canadian partners about the serious developments outlined in the independent investigations. The UK has full confidence in Canada's judicial system. Respect for sovereignty and the rule of law is essential. The Government of India's cooperation with Canada's legal process is the right next step. Very, very sterile diplomatic language. And what basically they are saying is that, unsurprisingly, we have full confidence in Canada's judicial system. Respect for sovereignty, the rule of law is essential. I mean, what does that mean other than that we must follow the rule of law? So, again, it's very sterile language, but they are being absolutely forced, with arm twisted behind their backs, to stand up and say, well, we do stand with Canada, but we're not going to condemn India. Notice there's nothing negative about India whatsoever in any of these statements. And Sky News then, again in this article, again under time, I'll just quickly skim across this, but they do give a lot of the history of the Khalistan movement and why Khalistan activists are being targeted. They give all sorts of examples, and they also quote British Sikh activist Kulwant Singh Matada, who again is one of these activists here in the UK who's on the who's received one of these notice to warn. In other words, he's receiving death threats from India, and they've quoted him about his issues and the fact that he's being threatened by India, which is great. They've also mentioned Najjar's killing and the threat against Panoon in the US, and they quoted Singh Matada as saying, "If I'm assassinated, then it's the British government's total responsibility." Right. Now, interesting then, the Sky News again have actually highlighted the fact, almost indirectly, that the British government are failing in their duty to protect British citizens. They're interviewing somebody who's saying, look, I've been told I'm under threat, but what's the British government doing about it? If I am killed, the blood is on the British government's hands. So again, this agenda is now rolling out beautifully, that it's highlighting again the failure of the British government. And this is in the British mainstream press, who traditionally are pro-British establishment. So again, the cracks are appearing here in the British media. Again, the British government is being held to account, which is great. Again, I'll quickly add to that. This is the free press at work, contrast with India. You don't get this in India. And Mr. Matada said he thinks the UK, unlike Canada and the US, is ignoring the issue to appease India. So again, a very powerful statement that Sky News have brought up there. And other leading Sikh activists in the US and Canada have also said that they've been warned about threats to their lives. India, meanwhile, has asked Britain to monitor UK-based Sikh separatists, accusing them of abusing the asylum system while being involved in, quote, terrorist activities. So again, for the purpose of balance, Sky have put India's point of view across there. And of course, it's that tired-old trope, the UK is harbouring Khalistan terrorists. Yes, right, what a load of nonsense, Thank you for that. So it's also nice to report that in Australia, Maninder Singh, who again we quoted yesterday, again on Sky News, his interview, we broadcast just a brief 1 or 2 minute section of that, where again we very articulately set out the case for Khalistan and what India have been up to. He was on mainstream ABC News yesterday in Australia. Again, same sort of interview, but again, once again, the Khalistani narrative is out in the mainstream media in Australia as well. So the Western world is now on the mainstream media hearing that Khalistan message. So again, this is the backlash. This is the wonderful backfire of India's ridiculous, obsessive agenda. All it's doing is propelling the Khalistan message into mainstream media across the Western world. Exactly what the Khalistan movement needs and wants. So thank you very much, India, for that. Now, The Guardian, again, one of our left-leaning newspapers here in the UK, overnight came out with an article once again pointing out many of the same sort of factors. This is widely read here in the UK, particularly amongst the left wing, and they report again Britain's reaction And it says Britain joined its Five Eyes intelligence partners in saying India's cooperation with Canada's legal process was, quote, the right next step. And the British Foreign Office, it quotes as saying, we're in contact with our Canadian partners about the developments. The UK has full confidence in Canada's judicial system. And again, just trots out the same anodyne, sterile language, diplomatic language. And the statement follows a phone call between Keir Starmer and the Canadian Prime Minister that happened, they say, on Tuesday night. Actually, elsewhere it's reported on Monday. But clearly there's been a lot of contact, I dare say probably more than one phone call that's gone on between the two countries. Both agreed on the importance of the rule of law. They agreed to remain in close contact pending the conclusions. Yeah, I absolutely have no doubt there will be a lot of communication between the UK and Canada over the coming days and weeks about this. And Trudeau did say yesterday publicly, and I think this is at the inquiry, James, which we'll report on another occasion, he called the assassination of Nijar, quote, a massive mistake that Canada's government will not allow to pass without consequence. Very heavy words, very strong words. We had clear and certainly now ever clearer indications that India had violated Canada's sovereignty. So again, no doubt that CSIS does have evidence. They're just withholding it for now. But there's no way Trudeau would be saying these sorts of things if he wasn't pretty damn confident that they had enough evidence to really hit India between the eyes with this. And right. And Trudeau has said that India was hosting a G20 summit when Canadian officials reached out to their Indian counterparts to discuss the killing. When Trudeau confronted Modi on the final day of the summit, he was told by the Indian Prime Minister that Canada should do more to crack down on Sikh separatists. And despite efforts to engage with Indian officials, Trudeau said they appeared uninterested. So again, Melanie Joly in Canada, Canada's foreign minister, she said that they had been reaching out to rally diplomatic support from Five Eyes intelligence partners, and they will be trying to balance, of course, the UK, as she said, will be trying to balance the close trade ties it has with India and the need to support Canada. And New Zealand's and his reaction from down under, from Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand's Foreign Minister, Winston Peters, suggested he would let the judicial processes unfold. And he didn't mention India in his statement. The alleged criminal conduct outlined publicly by Canadian law enforcement authorities, if proven, would be very concerning. Again, very diplomatic language from New Zealand. Again, they're trying not to be drawn into a diplomatic spat over this. They have no choice. So Australia has remained pretty much the same. Their Foreign Affairs Department said, Australia has made clear our concerns about the allegations and our respect for Canada's judicial process. Our position of principle is that the sovereignty of all countries should be respected. The rule of law should be respected. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese refused to answer any questions. So, and then The Guardian wraps up, the allegations have been broadening, making it difficult for the Five Eyes partners to ignore the evidence. Canadian police now claim that Indian diplomats have worked with criminal gangs to orchestrate a wider campaign of extortion, intimidation and coercion. And the article also does raise the point of Jagtar Singh Johal, where it says the UK has its own diplomatic battle with India over Jagtar Singh Johal. So really the reports from the various Five Eyes, or just go back to the US, they reported also to have said that they say the US State Department has quoted as being saying there are serious allegations. We've wanted to see India take them seriously and cooperate with Canada's investigation. They have chosen an alternative path. So contrast here. Canada's reaction has been pretty explosive, pretty condemning against India. The US's reaction officially has named India as, very diplomatically saying, they have chosen an alternative path rather than actually taking these allegations seriously. So they have named India, and they've been, again, in diplomatic language, pretty condemning of India. Contrast that with the UK, who've been absolutely sterile in their language. They will not condemn India. They've just said, well, we respect the rule of law. It means nothing. It's meaningless. Australia has actually followed pretty much the same suit, and as has New Zealand. So the three nations who are more commercially tied to India and looking to India for commercial ties have not condemned India, to their shame. It's the US and Canada who've been a lot more condemning and have specifically condemned India for their actions. So that's a very interesting split in the Five Eyes nations and how they've reacted against this. Now, one final part of this is the Times of India has covered the story, unsurprisingly, as has a lot of Indian media. And I won't go into too much detail, but again, the language they've been used is all very predictable. They've covered it. But the one thing I wanted to bring out from their article, which is very interesting, and in fact the Sikh Federation brought this out subsequently. I didn't know this when we reported on at the time. And I did say, James, when we reported on this, I predict that here in the UK, the situation of Avtar Singh Kandar will be brought up more publicly now over the next few days in the light of what's happened in Canada, the evidence that's been brought to governmental level and the proof potentially that exists that Nijjar was killed by the government of India. Avtar Singh Kandar, the likelihood now has massively increased that he was murdered by agents of the government of India. Now, it turns out, and I found this out in the last 24 hours, at that parliamentary meeting on Monday between the Sikh Federation, various representatives of the Sikh community and from the the Canadian Sikh Federation, they met British MPs, British Sikh MPs and high-level ministers here in the UK government. Also in attendance at that meeting was Michael Polak. Who is Michael Polak? Michael Polak is the family solicitor, the barrister rather, who is representing the family of Avtar Singh Kandar. He is undertaking his own investigations. He is representing Kandar's family. The fact that he was at that meeting is very, very significant. They've let him in on this meeting. What does that mean? It means clearly Avtar Singh Kandar's death is now in the sights of this whole agenda from the Sikh perspective. They are going to be pushing this. It also means that the MPs at that parliamentary meeting are now more aware, are now under more pressure to reopen the case of Avtar Singh Kandar. I think this is fantastic news. Clearly, the momentum is going to rebuild here to reopen an investigation, to push for a judge-led inquiry into Avtar Singh Kandar's death here in the UK, which was deeply suspicious. So fantastic news, James. Two big stories there. Firstly, the reaction from Five Eyes, the differing reaction. Secondly, Avtar Singh Kandar, the pressure's mounting.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, the information that we're going through and receiving and what's being reported, I mean, we could be here for days, let alone an hour.
Indeed. And looking at the clock, we must move on again because time is advancing very rapidly. Huge amounts in the news. We've had to try and really squeeze it down into these short segments. So I'll go on to my second story. We talked a lot about Lawrence Bishnoi. And this is very interesting because in the mainstream news agencies, now Lawrence Bishnoi's name has actually hit the mainstream news agencies. So this criminal residing in his jail cell in India, his profile is hitting the mainstream news sites. So, and I think it was worth just running through a quick profile of Lawrence Bishnoi, who he is, what he's been up to, where his roots are, because his name is now all over the global news wires. A young lad, he's about 31 years old. So he's had this gang in India, and particularly or primarily sourced from Gujarat. And it's known as the Bishnoi crime gang, and it's had this grim reputation for assassinations and extortion in India on its home soil. But its reach has now appeared to stretch much further after it's now been, of course, accused of its involvement of Nijjar's killing in Canada and potentially many others. And its alleged chief, this is the 31-year-old, get this, he's a law graduate of all things, yes. Lawrence Bishnoi. He's been behind bars for nearly a decade, and I find this particularly sad. I mean, what a waste of a life. 21 years old, and he spent 10 years of his following life in jail. I mean, what a waste of a law graduate of all things. And he's currently held in India's Gujarat state jail, facing trial for smuggling heroin from Pakistan. Now, the gang is suspected, of course, in the killing of wildly popular Sikh rapper Sidhu Moosewala in 2022. We've talked about that a lot in the past. And in the seemingly professional execution of a high-profile politician in India's financial capital, Mumbai, earlier this month. Now, Canadian police accuse the gang of possible involvement in this murder in Canada. And it sparked this furious diplomatic row after Ottawa said there was credible evidence linking New Delhi and potentially the Bishnoi gang to the killing. And the RCMP have said that India was using organised crime elements to target members of the South Asian diaspora and Sikh separatists, specifically naming the Bishnoi group. An RCMP Assistant Commissioner, Brigitte Gauvin, told reporters a couple of days ago that she said that we believe that the group is connected to agents of the government of India. So she's linking the Bishnoi gang publicly now to the government of India. And back on Monday, India's envoy to Ottawa was reportedly named by Canada amongst the persons of interest in Najjar's killing, widening that diplomatic row. And India calls the allegations it was connected to the killing, of course, preposterous and a strategy of smearing India for political gains. They've turned the tables back on Trudeau, saying it's all motivated by politics. You're trying to drum up votes amongst the Sikh diaspora, which is hilarious. And of course, that fallout from these accusations has seen the expulsion of diplomats on both sides. But Bishnoi himself, he was sentenced back in 2019 to another 5 years behind bars on 6 charges. These included 2 cases of attempted murder against police officers, as well as drug smuggling and carrying firearms. And he's currently held in a jail in Ahmedabad. And I use that term, I sort of loosely use the term the Gujarat mafia. And very clearly, he's, as James, you reported earlier, he's being held in this jail in Ahmedabad, despite the fact that he could well have been moved around jails in other states. But he's been held in a Gujarat jail in Ahmedabad since his incarceration, from which he purportedly continues to call the shots. And again, this institute in the US who said, how could he be? Well, I mean, clearly that's not naivety on the part of the American Institute. It's well known. Here in the UK even, these gang leaders are very powerful people. They do call the shots from the jail. And it's absolutely no doubt from an Indian jail that Bishnoi will have easily the capability to run his empire from the jail. We've seen pictures of even Indian politicians who've been incarcerated receiving absolute first-class treatment. They get massages, they get access to all sorts of things, telephones, the internet, everything in India's jail. It's no stretch of the imagination that Lawrence Bishnoi is sitting in comfort in Ahmedabad jail because he is orchestrating a campaign of violence against the Khalistani community under the tutelage and the watchful eye and probably the strings being controlled by Narendra Modi himself through Ajit Doval, Amit Shah, etc. So he probably will be living a very comfortable life in this jail in the Gujarat state. And again, it forms this whole Indian mafia that stretches all the way up to the political level. Now, who is Lawrence himself? He's the son of a farmer. And he was still a teenager when he made his first foray into organised crime in 2010. So he was just a really young lad, including by intimidating rivals when he dabbled in student politics, according to a police dossier. So again, he went into politics. And again, we talk about this blurred line between criminality and politics in India. Well, Lawrence Bishnoi was already dabbling in politics as a young teenager, but he was a little bit, shall we say, a little bit more forceful about the fact and against his political rivals. And now his gang made national headlines in 2022 when the rapper Shahdeep Singh Sidhu, who performed as Sidhu Moosewala, was shot dead in the Punjab. And of course, many of our audience have even linked his death to the Bishnoi gang. Canada-based fugitive Goldie Brar, real name Satinderjit Singh, designated a terrorist by India, claimed that he was behind that revenge killing. And the gang purports to be representatives of the Bishnoi Hindu sect from the deserts of Rajasthan. It's issued death threats against Bollywood star Salman Khan to avenge his hunting of 2 antelopes, which the Bishnoi community consider to be reincarnations of their guru. So God forbid you dare hunt an antelope in India. You'll end up bearing the wrath of the Bishnoi gang. 2 members of the gang were arrested by Indian police in April for firing at Khan's home in Mumbai. The actor, as it turned out, was unhurt. Then earlier this month, the Bishnoi gang was implicated in another high-profile murder, with police saying its members were behind the killing of Mumbai-based Baba Siddique, a politician with close ties to Bollywood and Khan. So, James, quite a nasty character, but unsurprising links to the Indian political elite.
Well, and look at it this way, Angus. Maybe he should have studied in his law courses a bit better, and he might have gotten off a bit easier in his trials there instead of sitting in a jail cell.
Sadly, I mean, the black and white between politics and crime is obviously very dark shades of grey in India, as we've often reported. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on those stories. Yeah. Clearly a lot going on there. It is a very complex story, and, well, we'll see which way those cards fall over the coming weeks. Right, let's move on to our comment section, and again, as we're already way over time. Yeah, this is an interesting, almost philosophical point from Hat B. Hat B says, India has used and abused every chance they've been given. I think this is actually quite poignant because India has so much potential. India has a wonderful people of so many diverse cultures and ethnicities and backgrounds, and it has so much potential for the future. It could do so much on the world stage. But as you rightly say, almost indirectly here, it's been so used and abused by the RSS. And Narendra Modi, and I keep saying this obsessive agenda about the Khalistan, look at the damage it's done to India as a nation. On the world stage, now you've got the Western world turning against India. They're almost pushing it into the arms of China, of all nations, this totalitarian regime of China. I shake my head in despair, James, really, what's happening to India.
Yeah, and again, we've talked about this over and over about how they're at the precipice of time here, that they've got to make a choice at this fork in the road to decide which direction they're going to go.
Yeah, and Gromwell Sukhwinder, this is an interesting comment. Thank you for your comment, and your thanks. The Sikh community all over the world is thankful and appreciative of Canada, particularly Justin Trudeau, along with our friends south of the border. This actually is an important point, because actually everybody involved in this has a stake and should be thanking each other for their efforts. Because, yeah, well done to Justin Trudeau, well done to the United States and the senators, the congressmen and women who've been behind this and lobbying. It's well done to the whole Sikh community. This is a massive combined effort. It could only have happened by a huge weight, a wave of momentum that has come from the grassroots of the Sikh community. It's in our own little way, James and I, we've done our little bit, and thank you for your thanks for us doing that. But we've been a tiny part of a massive effort that's come from every possible section of the Sikh community, all the way from grassroots across the diaspora, also in the Punjab, the brave souls out there in the Punjab who've had the courage, the guts to stand up and push from their own way in the Punjab, all the way around the diaspora. Everybody can actually pat themselves on the back for the momentum that's been built, because it's the weight of 1 million tiny hands pushing on that great boulder that is moving the boulder forwards, James. I think everybody has a stake in this.
Absolutely, and even outside of the traditional, whether it's the Sikh diaspora, the Chinese, the Russians, I mean, it's just got such broad-ranging impacts that that this is going to bring out.
It is, and Punjab is not India. Comments, of course, again, like many commenters have said, thank you to to Justin Trudeau, rightly so. And Punjab is not India credits America as well for this. Interesting, Hat B, of course, raises once again, when is the UK government going to speak? The silence is deafening. Well, they have spoken, and they may as well, frankly, have stayed silent. Very sterile language. Again, I think Justin Trudeau will be feeling a little bit aggrieved, saying, look, come on, guys, you're supposed to be our allies in this. Why are you not more vocal? We know why. It's trade deals. Unfortunately, it's the power of the dollar. It's the shameful embarrassment of the UK government, who have really had a pretty shameful history over their dealings with India. Actually, going back centuries, ironically, but also their shameful dealing with the Sikh community. So I think it's a very pertinent point, that. Actually, Kandar. Oh, yeah. One of our resident counter voices in our comments column. Ashley Kandar. How many Indians live in Canada? How many Canadians live in India? Understand where I'm going with this? Actually, I have to say I don't quite, but all I would say is that there are a lot of Indians living in Canada and across the diaspora, and there are not many Canadians living in India, for a very good reason, because actually most people prefer to live in a democratic environment. That's why there are so many, particularly Sikhs, living in Canada and across the diaspora. When will Canada charge, prosecute and punish these imaginary people? Well, actually, I think you'll find they've just expelled 6 diplomats. They chose to expel them rather than push for criminal charges. And again, they are giving the benefit. This is what happens in a democracy, is that they've been given the benefit of diplomatic immunity. Don't worry, the evidence is there, actually, it will come out. But they have chosen the path of the rule of law, which unfortunately India doesn't follow. And I'll hand over to you shortly, James, because this is all very much to do with you. They're burning Indian flags in Canada and insulting the most important leaders. Well, Canada takes no action. Would it be different if they were burning US flags in Canada? Would they act differently? Well, from my perspective, actually, no. This is what's called freedom of speech. I can stand outside in public and I can get the stars and stripes and I can set it alight and I can shout publicly, I hate America, down with America. Do you know what will happen to me? Absolutely nothing. Because that's what you can do in a democracy. I can stand and burn the Union Jack, the flag of my nation, and say, down with the British government, down with the US government, down with Western governments. Do you know what will happen to me? Absolutely nothing. That is democracy in action. What would you do in the Punjab if you burnt an Indian flag and you said, down with the RSS? I think we can predict that, James, can't we?
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong. You've heard me talk about it before. I am against flag burning because I think it represents the whole of a nation, not just a political party. So that's my opinion. And a lot of Canadians share that opinion. But at the same time, we also respect everybody else's rights to have their thoughts and their opinions and their freedom. So again, it's, my personal choice and my personal beliefs don't impact the behaviors of someone else in that regard.
Yeah, so Ashley, thank you for all your comments. They're great to talk about. We do love to spar with you through the comments and through the show. So do keep those comments coming. John Burns says it's a bold accusation. Now this is an important point. What proof has been presented to the public? Canadians who don't like Trudeau won't accept anything until they see it. Very good point, actually. Now Trudeau actually has a difficult situation here. He probably can't present this proof because there'll be national interest issues at stake here. He probably can't, which is leaving him open to the right wing of Canada to actually take pot shots at him and legitimately say, well, where's your proof, Trudeau? You made these huge accusations. You're bringing Canada's name on the global stage into question if you're not presenting proof. So very good point, James. I think Trudeau's caught between a rock and a hard place on this.
Absolutely. And the law is very clear that he cannot release that information. That's up to the RCMP and the Ministry of Justice to deal with that end of it. And unlike the US, our system is quite different than theirs. They moved on an indictment, which means that all of the information in the Gupta case is a public access and available. Whereas here in Canada, we're not on that same system. And so we do not tend to release that information because it can jeopardize the whole trial process and give grounds for either a full throwing out of the case or at least appeals. So again, we have different systems and it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think India's accusation that Trudeau has done all this to drum up political support, no, I think this immediately can be shot down as an argument, because when he came out a year ago with the original accusations, he's now spent a year receiving political backwash from the right wing, who spent a year attacking him, saying, well, where's your evidence? So actually his political credibility has taken a right pounding because of this, and likewise now. So I think India's accusations saying this whole thing was for political gain. Sorry, he's taken political damage for coming out with this. So I think this is a very pertinent point. And then final comments. Kuljit Mangat says, love you, Scott and James. Well, love you too. Thank you for the comment. Finally, the truth is pervading. It absolutely is. And Harjeet says, oh dear, we're in trouble, James. Greetings. Your programme was so engaging that I missed drinking my tea and eating my croissant. I blame both of you for it. Well, Harjeet, Here's a thing for you. Here's a promise. When Khalistan happens, if you're in Khalistan and James and I in Khalistan, I promise that James and I will buy you a tea and a croissant and we will share it over a table in a cafe in Khalistan on the day, or certainly the days after Khalistan is established. Come and join us. We invite you for a tea and croissant in Khalistan.
That's right.
And final comment, Koal Singh Tandy says, salute you guys and salute to you. Please, 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 you're all the gem heroes for us. Your names will be on the first page when Khalistan's history will be written. Good luck. Well, thank you for that lovely comment. We will not be on the first page. There are many, many courageous, heroic people, many shaheeds who will be on that first page. We will all stand up and honour them. Hopefully James and I will be on a back page somewhere for our tiny little contribution to the Khalistan argument, James. But certainly I suspect really there are many, many heroic people, many whom we've talked about in the past, who will be on that first page. And many in Khalistan, I'm sure, will honour those names for many centuries to come, James.
Absolutely. And I won't even be at the front of the lineup unless it's food.
Absolutely. And on that hungry note, we must wrap things up for Perspectives for another week. But thank you so much for joining us. And do keep those comments coming in. We do appreciate them. We do love talking about them. So send those comments in, whatever they happen to be. And of course, don't forget you can message us directly at message@satellitetv.com if there's anything you'd like to let us know, or any news stories or things that we might have missed that you think we should be talking about. So do get in touch. But thank you very much indeed for watching Perspectives. We do appreciate all your support, all your lovely comments. Do keep them coming. But until next time, it is a goodbye from me and it is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
We will see you next time. Thanks for watching Perspectives.